So we are speaking, or I am speaking with Mike Martin from the Monarch Research Project. And Mike, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and how you got connected with the project?
Well, recently in 2017, I retired from Kirkwood. 18 and a half years of managing the grounds department. So you consider anything outside was mine. Clark McLeod was going to expand his operation out there. It's a nonprofit, the Monarch Research Project. He made me an offer I couldn't refuse. I took the buyout from Kirkwood for retirement, left there, and began work right away at the research project.
Okay. Well, I'll get back to what you do there. Can you tell us a little bit about the Monarch Research Project?
Basically, what that is, again, it's a nonprofit. We're utilizing the Monarch. You heard the term canary in the coal mine. And what that means is that when there's a reduction in the numbers of the monarchs, that kind of sets the alarm off, telling us that there's a concern with not just the monarchs, but other pollinators. We're looking at establishing more habitat throughout Lynn County. We're using Lynn County as the area of test. It's our test market, and then eventually expanding beyond. But here in Lynn County, we're looking at the such things as the first moonshot being established in the habitat, 1,000 public and private acres of habitat.
Okay.
So if you look at Norridge Park, Squaw Creek, Seminole Valley, the Fox Trail, along the Hoover Trail, various areas, there's habitat being established. We've been assisting with that.
Okay.
Another part of that, all the secondary roads, the ditches that are great sources to establish habitat. And so we're helping with that. And not only is it 1,000 miles, there's the other side of the ditch. So you're looking at 2,000 miles. So what we've recently done, we have what we call the Swiss Army knife of trucks. We go along and we will identify different plots along the ditches. So the plot is 8 feet wide by 20 feet long. And we'll go out every 50 feet along that distance of the secondary road in the ditch, and they'll prepare it. Whether mow it, they'll spray it, and then in the late fall, early winter, they'll seed it.
Okay.
All with one vehicle. Well, we did it manually up by Lakeside, by our facility. We being myself and a couple other guys, where we would walk and spray every 50 feet and then go back. So we did that 2 miles one side and 2 miles the other side, 4 miles total. And that was about 3 years ago, and we're seeing plants coming up. So we know with all the conditions, the stars aligned, it does work.
Yeah, it reinstitutes those kinds of habitats.
Right. And so the whole idea is with that, the use of those ditches, starting with the southeast quadrant, we'll get that habitat established. Once it's all set, planted, and ready, then secondary roads department from Lynn County takes over the mowing operation. Well, they will come in and mow it 2 or 3 times a year to help get it established.
Okay.
And then we move on to the southwest side. Get the southwest side done, the secondary roads, then probably the northwest, and then probably the northeast. So we're kind of working our way around.
Yeah.
And,
Yes, it was that clockwise
yeah.
around.
Yep. But it's something that we're doing because it hasn't been done in certain respects. But what's nice about it is it's bringing the awareness, especially to people that are living out there. A lot of the farmers, a lot of the people that have property along those ditches are asking questions. That's what we want. We want people to ask questions and increasing their knowledge. And they're now buying into the idea that why am I mowing these ditches? Why am I out there mowing my lawn and then I drop down and mow the ditches when I can have beautiful habitat?
So what are some of the different kinds of plants and things that you're seeding into?
We've created a specified mix that it took a little bit of input from several different people, and the whole idea is we want heavy forbs, heavy flowers, and we know we need to have grasses, but we want those grasses to be low. Little blue stem is probably the tallest that we have. Prairie drop seed, and there's a few other ones in there, kind of the short grasses. And then we'll have the whole idea of habitat is you want to have like 3 to 5 spring blooming flowers. You want to have a huge variety of summer blooming flowers, and then again 3 to 5 or more fall blooming flowers, so that there is nectar available all 3 of those seasons. So when we look at planting, that mix is set up with things like foxglove. There may be some zizia in there, purple coneflower. In the fall, there'll be some goldenrod. There'll be some Joe Pye weed. There'll be rattlesnake master. There's the list goes on. But the whole idea is that we're focusing in on year-round nectar, year-round flowers, so that when the pollinators are moving from site to site, they don't necessarily have to cross the road, because that has been brought up, that when you're planting along the roads and the ditches, aren't those pollinators going to cross the road
And end up on your windshield.
and become windshield?
Yeah.
And that's a good point, because if you think about, I'm older, 20 years ago when we were kids, or 40 years ago when we were kids, we would have to stop at the end of the day when we go on our trips to clean off the windshield. Or maybe on certain days when we washed our vehicles, we would always get that bug cleaner and a bug sponge and clean that windshield off. We don't do that now. Because
I hadn't thought about that. I've noticed, I wonder to myself, am I just thinking back too fondly on my youth? But I was thinking, I used to go out in the evenings and catch lightning bugs and things like that, and you just don't see
that
as much anymore. So
No.
yeah,
and that was the thing that we look at, and with our planting in the ditches, the habitat every 50 feet, now those insects, those pollinators, those butterflies, those bees, they don't need to cross the road, because they will naturally go from plot to plot to plot down that ditch. Yeah, a few will cross the road. That's just part of the deal. But we're keeping that habitat close and establish it.
Well, and you mentioned it sounds like you might have some partnerships with parks and things here
Yes.
in town.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I
Does-
think Norridge has some areas now that are planted differently.
Yeah, what they had there at Norridge was there was an area. If you think about where the pool is located, there was a couple low areas near this little stream-like environment. And what they had done was they said, it's taken a lot of work to go in there. We can mow it sometimes. Some days we can't. If it rains, it puddles. What can we do different? So we got with the Parks Department there in Cedar Rapids, and they laid out a huge plot, and we provided all the seed.
Okay.
And they went in, and it's very easy to establish habitat in a lawn, because when they kill off the turf grass and they came back in the fall and seeded it, you had an immediate return. A lot of things like black-eyed Susan, that's going to more or less flower the first year when it comes up. And they had a few cover items in there, but if you get a chance, if you haven't been there, you get a chance to check it out.
Yeah, I think I know exactly what you're talking about. My daughter runs cross country, and I think there was one time I was trying to get from one side to the other, and so I was running through this kind of high grass flower stuff.
Yeah.
I was like, I don't want to step on anything.
And so,
But
they're at Norridge. They do
Yeah.
a great. Norridge is a great park where they have the farmers market there. They have their gardens. The master gardeners have all their displays out there. And again, the Lynn County ISU Extension, Lynn County Master Gardeners, they're a great group that we work with a lot. Now, one of the best kept secrets in Marion is Lau Park.
Oh, uh-huh.
Lau Park. Have you been there?
I've been out there to events held at the building out there, the
Right,
facility out
right.
there, right?
And they have that outside venue also where they have concerts and different activities. Out there at Lau Park, it's a huge establishment of habitat. That's one of the places when we raise monarchs, we release our monarchs. I go out there and release monarchs.
Okay.
And it's fun to interact with the kids that are out there, because if there's kids out there, I'm like a magnet. I go to them. You want to help me? They know so much. They are so dang intelligent. And they can tell me the life cycles. They can tell me about the eggs, the larvae, the caterpillars, the pupa, the chrysalis. They know their stuff. But they're like sponges. They want to know more. Another part of our moonshot is that we're raising the monarchs out to increase the fall migrating population. And while we're doing that, we're bringing people on board, and they're raising monarchs in their yard. They're raising monarchs on their patios, on their
Well,
decks.
I guess, you know, that's what I wanted to kind of push our conversation in that direction, and you kind of went there naturally, because one of the things that we've been talking about during our series is the idea of wilderness. We've talked about big, you know, wilderness in terms of, you know, you think of like the national parks and those kinds of things, but really there are ways to nurture wilderness even in the way in which you are taking care of your backyard.
Right, exactly.
And participating in things like the Monarch Project. Can you talk a little bit about how somebody just, you know, could make some changes or decisions or
Sure.
nurture
And
wilderness where they're at?
that's kind of the direction that we are heading big time, is that we're helping people, again, establish what we call pollinator zones in their yards. Now, and it can be so simple. Even if you don't have the space, you can do it in containers. So you've got the option of putting plants, pollinator plants, and host plants for various butterflies and things in pots. If you have the space in your yard, you can create the habitat right there. So you're bringing nature in to your space. When people think about sitting out on their decks or going outside for a walk, what more enjoyment do you get out of walking across a blank slate of green grass as opposed to walking amongst flowers of various heights, grasses, shrubs, and trees? It's the feeling is so much more welcoming, knowing that you're doing your part, but it's much more enjoyable. Our big push right now, which has been probably in the last 5 years, are really looking at the native aspect, going with native plants. And the reason behind that is native plants that are established or planted are part of the ecosystem. And with that, the insects are a part of that ecosystem. They need the native plants for food, for shelter, for protection, for rearing of their young, as opposed to other plants that are not native. A comparison that we're going to be doing this year out of our research lab is we're going to be putting out native pollinator plants, and right beside it, cultivars of that native plant that have been developed for color. And prior knowledge has showed us that the insects are going to feed on the native and they will not touch the non-native. So when people are going out to landscape their yards and put things in
Because they look pretty.
may not be necessarily the way to go. You can still get pretty and great, great perfume or great scents, smell, you can get things that change in color with natives. It's right there. An example would be like the bur oak, the oak tree. It can support 553 different species of insects, as opposed to a ginkgo tree, which comes from the east, almost nothing. You can look at things like the various native plants that we have. The palette is huge. The support that gives, you're going to bring insects to your yard. When they go that route with the natives, is they're bringing those insects, they're pollinating not only on those plants, but their gardens are getting pollinated. Their apple trees are being pollinated. Their pear trees, their cherry trees. It all works. It's all part of that cycle of nature. And that's the direction we're really trying to head in. It doesn't take a lot of work.
I'm remembering last fall you had a speaker out who was talking about the importance of just insects, not only for the pollination of plants, but just as the base level of the whole ecosystem in our area.
And that's Doug Tallamy.
That's it.
Doug
I couldn't
Tallamy.
remember his name.
And he'll be back again this year.
Oh, good.
In the fall for our landowner forum. Doug's a great guy, and he's a great speaker. Yeah, he talks about the importance of insects and that whole thing we talked about going native. And in his yard, if you'll see in some of the videos that he shares, it looks very rugged, but it's natural. It's a natural state. And not only do you see the variety of insects, the variety of caterpillars, the variety of birds. It's incredible, because he is better at explaining it than I am. The number of caterpillars or insects that specific birds need to feed their young on a daily basis is incredible. And that is one of the things, by creating your own natural habitat within your yard, it's so dramatic, so important, and makes such a difference.
So you can be enjoying your little bit of wilderness, visually, like you said, with its scents and smells, and also have the knowledge that you're helping our greater ecosystem.
We've done a pretty good job of making some mistakes down the road that we're now learning from. It's not too late. And like I said earlier, it's about taking care of what we have now for those in the future. When we look at planting shrubs and trees, creating that environment that gives off, creates the oxygen, creates the atmosphere that we are breathing. When that environment is void of trees and plants, what's happening with that? I think a lot of what's happening, we are here in Iowa, we're the people that feed the planet. And in farming, a lot of what we see now is the absence of fence lines, the absence of streams, the absence of what we would call islands of vegetation, because we've taken that all out and created a solid monoculture, exactly, of corn and beans. Whereas before we would have those fence lines that had all kinds of natural vegetation. We would have streams. Now it's all tiled. And so when a bird or a butterfly or a bee flies over this monoculture landscape, where's that fueling station? Being those little habitats, they're gone. So knowing that I've got to expend this much energy to go from point A to point B, I need something here. And am I getting it? A lot of times they aren't. So again, they are suffering. So with us as homeowners, if we do our part to create our own little suburban habitats, it's so easy. It becomes a fueling station for those insects that are moving from point A to point B. My neighbor is really big into hummingbirds. And he has all kinds of flowers and plants that attract hummingbirds. And I'm not exaggerating when there's not a time that you may not see 30 hummingbirds in the area.
Really?
And now, because of that, I have plants and feeders
Uh-huh.
to take care of those hummingbirds.
Nice.
And other people that are
Kind of just grow and spread.
Right,
Grow and spread.
right. And it becomes contagious. People stop, they ask questions, they watch, they learn, and then they do their own little thing in their yards.
So as we kind of maybe come to a close here, one last question for you. If I'm interested in this kind of a thing, or I have a question, can we call out to the Monarch Research Project and get some answers that from out there?
There's a lot of things you can do. You can go
Uh-huh.
online to monarchresearch.org.
Okay.
That'll help
Guide
give,
you,
give some direction.
Yeah.
I shared earlier the ISU Extension, Lynn County Master Gardeners,
They've got a lot
fountain,
of.
just vast array of knowledge and experience and information. They have their helpline. You can call in and talk to them about that. We, like I said, we are accessible. You can get a hold of us and let us know you're interested in visiting more.
Okay.
And people can come out and talk to us.
Okay.
When the weather is nicer,
Yeah, it's a little gray and rainy today.
we're able to walk around, and we're always looking for volunteers.
Okay.
And what's nice about when the volunteers come out, it's a give and take. They share with us, and we share with them. We let them get hands-on experience in doing things. They ask a lot of questions. It's contagious.